Hey everyone. You know, since Memorial Day is, well, technically 20 something days away from now, I guess the question I think anybody would have, especially with the fact that today, Captain America Civil War is out officially, even though a lot of people have seen it already and have commented on it and spoiled it. Another Marvel movie, not necessarily part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is being released very soon in theaters on Memorial Day weekend, or at least close to it. That, of course, is X-Men Apocalypse, which so far from what I've seen, Andre of Black Nerd Comedy has seen, Jeremy Johns, and hopefully Angry Joe, and other Joe have seen, have been spectacular trailers. It's really gotten you hyped up for the film. It seems that Bryan Singer has done it once again. But continuity-wise, though, where does X-Men Apocalypse fall within? As you can see in front of me, I have, well, with the exception of these movies, you take these out of the equation, I have all of the X-Men films. Now, true, they're not positioned continuity-wise the way they should be. But when you take a look at it in a sense, X-Men First Class, Origins, the Wolverine, and all that, basically that's the entire X-Men continuity. Now we know with the original X-Men trilogy, that's the X-Men's venture officially into theatrical film. We do know that the Wolverine takes place after Last Stand. We know that. X-Men 3, Last Stand. We know it takes place after that. We also know that First Class supposedly takes place before, or the first X-Men film, which came out in 2000. But continuity-wise, we also know that X-Men Origins Wolverine somewhat comes before that as well. Somewhat. So if you were to move these movies around just slightly a bit and go in a continuity standpoint, hopefully I'm not dropping anything here, you go to a continuity standpoint, that right there is the X-Men continuity. Now you probably wonder, what about Days of Future Past? Where does that fall into? Well, Days of Future Past, believe it or not, actually falls into the 1960s. Actually falls right in between to here. So if we take both versions, the roll cut as well, and we put it right here, that, in a sense, is where it falls in between. But does it? See, Days of Future Past really is one of those continuity stories that not only fixes continuity, but erases continuity. Basically, according to my friend Zara Nizarek, and I'm sure everybody has seen this already, as well as I, the ending pretty much fixes everything that happened with the film, with Last Stand. That's right. Xavier's back, Jean's back, and Cyclops is back. Basically, Last Stand was erased from existence. So, in a sense, continuity-wise, it's kind of both ways. Days of Future Past, from a continuity standpoint, actually takes place after the Wolverine. Because if you watch the Wolverine and you saw the end credits, which became the end credits, the post-end credits, if you will, or the post-end credits scene, if you've seen that, then you pretty much know that continuity-wise, this story takes place afterwards. But because it connects both timelines and is trying to fix a current continuity, it's sort of in between here. So, if you wanted to do it from a continuity flub standpoint, you could say that it's kind of both ways, if you catch my drift. You can kind of say, and I'm thinking maybe I'm thinking they did this for this very reason. You could say, in a sense, continuity-wise, because of the storyline, part of Days of Future Past, continuity-wise, takes place after First Class, before Trilogy, and then the other part, like the future part, the present-day future part, takes place after the Wolverine. I know it sounds a little confusing, but if you look at it from that standpoint, continuity-wise, that's how it works in a storyline perspective. Beginning, beginning before X-Men, which was Wolverine. First Class, which was the start of X-Men. First continuation of First Class, but takes place in their timeline, tying into the current. Trilogy, the Wolverine, and Rogue, or Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut, whatever you want to call it. Because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that's thought, well, why did they bring out a Rogue Cut? Yeah, the fans demanded it. I think they knew what they were doing. I think Fox and Marvel, even though they don't see eye to eye at times, Fox and Marvel both knew what they were doing. Because you can't tell me Marvel doesn't know what Fox is doing. You can't tell me Marvel's not getting a piece of the pie. They are. It's just that, they haven't worked anything out like Sony has yet to get the cinematic universe to expand in all Marvel movies. Anyway, long story short, when they released this, they didn't have to. They didn't really have to, okay? But they released it because she was originally advertised to be in the movie. So they released it, but again, you got to think about it from this standpoint. They knew what they were doing. They, at 20th Century Fox, and even Marvel, they knew what they were doing. They knew that if they cut out Rogue, fans were going to demand that she be brought back. Fans are going to demand to see the version of her of the movie with her in it. They knew that. But they also knew, because there are fans out there that will do what I do and try to figure out exactly what Days of Future Past fits in the movie cinematic universe of the X-Men. So, Days of Future Past, in a sense, because they pretty much knew that, that's why they did release a Rogue Cut. Yes, because we wanted to see it with Rogue in it, because Rogue's very popular, but they also knew, continuity-wise, we were going to do discussions like this, do videos like this. And by knowing that, they also knew that we would look at it from a continuity standpoint, that part of X-Men's Days of Future Past takes place after First Class, and that the other part of X-Men Days of Future Past takes place after the Wolverine. So they knew that. But now, here's the question. If that's the case, and Days of Future Past takes place before, or half of it takes place after First Class, and the other takes place after the Wolverine, where does Apocalypse fit in? Well, Apocalypse fits in right here, right in between Days of Future Past and the beginning of the X-Men trilogy. It fits in right there. But you might say, well, wait a minute, Brian. You said that Days of Future Past fixed a lot of things X-Men related. That anything that came after X-Men United was erased. And you'd be right. Thus, it would make X-Men Days of Future Past their own standalone films, even though they took place after the Wolverine from a continuity standpoint. So, if you take Days of Future Past out of the equation because of what they did, then X-Men Apocalypse, in a sense, takes place right here. X-Men Apocalypse becomes the actual sequel to First Class. That's right. Continuity-wise, I know it took about 10 minutes, a little over 10 minutes. I apologize for that. But X-Men Apocalypse, continuity-wise, takes place right after First Class, thus making it the official sequel to X-Men First Class. That's where X-Men Apocalypse comes in, right after First Class. Days of Future Past, yes indeed, was a sequel, but it was also a sequel in a sense to both the Wolverine and X-Men Last Stand, the X-Men trilogy, as well. It basically served as a sequel to both First Class, a half a sequel to First Class, and half a sequel to the Wolverine and the original X-Men trilogy. That's what Days of Future Past lied within, because basically it fixed the timeline and the continuity that Last Stand kind of ruined, and thus becomes the movie, and thus becomes its own movie, its own identity, but in a sense becomes the actual sequel to X-Men United. Yeah. Again, I know continuity-wise it sounds a little confusing. I do apologize for that. But continuity-wise, from a cinematic universe continuity standpoint, Days of Future Past, because of the ending, becomes the official sequel that takes the place of Last Stand. It does. And by doing so, not only does it take its place, but it officially goes from being a half a sequel to First Class to being and half a sequel to the trilogy and Wolverine to being a sequel that takes place after X-Men United and basically erases Last Stand and even the Wolverine from existence, from continuity. Thus, they become their own standalone movies. And in turn, it makes X-Men Apocalypse, upcoming on Memorial Day, the official sequel to First Class. That's what it does. Now, if Hugh Jackman makes an appearance as Wolverine in Apocalypse, and maybe has some interaction with Mystique, Rebecca Stamos' character, and I guess maybe hint at the fact that they both know of the past, both know of Days of Future Past, then yeah, continuity-wise, that would make it come afterwards. But if that's not the interaction, but at least hints that something's there, then yeah, continuity-wise, cinematic universe-wise, it comes after this. It comes after the new sequel to X-Men 2, which is Days of Future Past. It takes place after that, but continuity-wise takes place in between here. I know you're thinking, oh my God, my brain's going to explode. Get to the point here. The point is this. X-Men Days of Future Past erased Last Stand and the Wolverine from continuity base. Basically wiped them out of existence. So basically took the Wolverine, like this, and erased it. Like my finger's over it right now, erased it from continuity. It took Last Stand, which is in here, and replaced it with this, thus making that the official third movie in the trilogy and in storyline continuity. But when you look back, when you're doing movies based on stories that took place before the trilogy, Apocalypse falls in between here. I know it sounds confusing. I know some people are going to think, man, this is really messing with my head. Because what if they do acknowledge it? Well, if they acknowledge it, they acknowledge it. But to me, I think my friend Zara Nizarak said it best. this movie here wiped out Last Stand and thus wiped out the Wolverine. Even though those movies exist and are made, they're not part of the continuity. They're their own standalone films now. They're like basically what-if films. Days of Future Past is now part 3, is the third sequel, the official third sequel in the trilogy after United, and Apocalypse is going to fall in between First Class and the first X-Men film. That's how, in a way, it makes sense. Again, I know it doesn't make sense to a lot of people watching, and know it still confuses people. Heck, it confuses me still. Because, in a sense, what if, let's say, Apocalypse acknowledges what happened to the timeline? What if he has an idea? I mean, they show him at the end of the movie in a post-credit scene. So, who's to say he probably doesn't know? And if that's the case, then yes, continuity-wise, from the X-Men Cinematic Universe, the XCW, the XCU, if you will, then yes, it takes place after Days of Future Past, the new sequel after X-Men United, continuity-wise. But, unless that is acknowledged by Apocalypse himself, acknowledged or hinted at by maybe an encounter by Mystique and Wolverine, if Hugh Jackman shows up in the film, then yeah, it does take place after this movie. But if not, then continuity-wise, as far as I see it, it takes place in between First Class and the first movie, and the first original X-Men movie. So, hopefully I kind of gave you an idea, continuity-wise, as well when it takes place. So, to end this video in closing, let me make it more clearer. X-Men Apocalypse, which comes out at the end of this month, continuity-wise, falls in between First Class and the first X-Men movie. That's where it falls in. As far as I'm concerned, I believe that's where it's going to fall in continuity-wise. Now, unless there's some kind of acknowledgement by Rebecca Romijn Stamos' character Mystique and Hugh Jackman's character Wolverine, if he's in there, that both remember the alternate timeline, then continuity-wise, it will take place after Days of Future Past, which did wipe out the Wolverine and X-Men Last Stand and became the true sequel to X-Men United. So, again, in closing, unless that happens, which we don't know yet, unless that happens, cinematic continuity-wise, Apocalypse takes place in between First Class and the first X-Men film. So, hopefully that cleared things up. Hopefully that didn't confuse anybody any more than it should have. And that's all I'm going to really say about it right now, folks. Let me know what you think down below. Comment if you like. I know this was a little long, and I will talk to y'all later.